Hey, welcome back, listeners. You're listening to another chapter of the dramatic reading of The Return of the Indian by Lynn Read Banks. This is the second book in the Indian in the Cupboard series, and we are on Chapter 8, The Operation. You're brilliant, breathed Patrick as Omri delicately picked up the tiny object. With his free hand, he overturned one of the boxes in which the plastic figures had been stored, spread Kleenex on it, and set the bag in the middle. This is the little medicine bag from Tommy, the World War I soldier who, when they brought back, nothing but his remains, his clothes, and his medical kit were available. But they grabbed that kit so that this nurse they brought back could help do surgery on wounded Little Bear. Before it's too late, Matron, which is what they call her, bustled over with a swish of starched apron. She stared a little at the sight of the battered old bag, but not half as much as she did when she opened it. She fairly reeled back. Are you seriously suggesting that I pull bullets out of a man's back with this antiquated collection of museum pieces? She almost shrieked. Are they so different from what you use today? Asked Omri desperately. Matron gingerly plucked out a tiny hypodermic syringe from the bag and held it up like a dead rat between finger and thumb. Look at it. Just look, I ask you. Matron, Omri said earnestly, you don't seem to understand. That's all there is. It's the best we can manage. If you can't do it, he'll die. Our friend. Please. All we ask is that you try. Matron gave Omri an enigmatic look. Then she took hold of Tommy's bag and briskly emptied it out on the padded table. All sorts of microscopic things came out. The boys could just make out the rolls of bandages, dressings, dark bottles, instruments packed in flat cases. She examined these very minutely and then straightened up and said, Of course, this is some kind of nightmare. But even in nightmares, it's my policy to do my best. Omri and Patrick clutched each other. You mean you'll do it? If you can provide me with an operating table, a bright light, some disinfectant, and a strong cup of tea. Omri could, and did, provide all these things. By this time it was 1 o'clock in the morning, and the whole house was fast asleep, but he tiptoed downstairs and fetched disinfectant, cotton, some clean handkerchiefs, an electric kettle full of boiling water. He also detached the cap from the tube of toothpaste and washed it out. This was for a mug. Then he made some strong tea with a tea bag and added milk and sugar. He hoped she took sugar. He carried all this on a tray up the stairs very quietly. When he returned to his room, Patrick had fixed up the box as an operating table. Omri's bedside lamp, which had a flexible neck and a 100-watt bulb, his mother had a thing about reading in bad light, had been moved onto the chest. The light shone straight down onto the table, making no shadows. There was Kleenex spread everywhere. It looked very hygienic. Little Bear had already been laid out on the table, and Matron, armed with a tiny pair of scissors, was soon cutting up a handkerchief to make a surgical gown for herself and an operating sheet for Little Bear. I shall need an assistant, she said briskly. What about the Indian girl? She doesn't speak much English. We'll see. She looks bright enough. She beckoned Bright Stars, who was already at her elbow. How? She said in a light voice. Bright Stars looked puzzled. When I point, you give, Matron went on. Bright Stars nodded intently. You say, I do. Oh no, that's Bright Stars. You say, I do. Omri was directed to pour a drop of disinfectant and some boiling water in a small tin lid Patrick had prized off a box of candy drops. The water turned white. Matron dropped the instruments in and after some moments poured off the liquid into another lid. Meanwhile, Omri was dipping a few drops of tea into the toothpaste cap. Ah, thank you, dear, she said, and when she saw it, she seemed quite cheerful now. She picked up the cap in both hands. It was, to her, almost the size of a bucket, but she drank most of it in one go, and smacked her lips. That's more like it. What spinach is to Popeye, tea is to me. Now, let's get on with it. The boys saw very little of the operation itself. The light shone straight down on a white-covered table. Matron stood with her back to them, working silently. Every now and then she would point at something on the tray. Bright Stars would swiftly pick it up and hand it to her. Remember, Bright Stars is Little Bear's wife. This is like life and death, or, type of thing. So she's definitely paying attention. Only once or twice did she fumble, and then Matron would snap her fingers impatiently. For a long time, there was not a sound except the occasional stamp of the pony's feet or the clink of metal. Surgery. Then Matron said, "I do believe we're in luck." The boys, who had been afraid to come too close, though Matron had made them both tie handkerchiefs around their faces, leaned forward. Handkerchiefs around faces, so it's already just some face masks, some facial protection, something we're all very familiar with these days to prevent germs. "One ball went in one side and straight out the other. Missed his lung by a hairbreadth, I'm thankful to say. I've patched it up as best I could. Now I'm playing hide and seek with the other one. I think it's lodged against his shoulder blade. Not far in. I think I've got it. Yes." She made a sharp movement and held up a minute pair of tweezers. And whatever they held was far too small to see, but the tips were red, and Omri shuddered. Matron dropped the bit of metal into the tray with a ping. Suddenly, she began to laugh. "Whatever would St. Thomas surgical staff say if they could see me now?" she gurgled. "Will he be okay?" Omri asked breathlessly. "Oh, I think so. Yes, indeed. He's a very lucky lad, this your Indian friend." "We're all lucky to have found you," Omri said sincerely. Matron was stripping the wrapper off a large field dressing. First World War dressings," she was murmuring. "Amazing how they've lasted. As if they were made last week." She indicated to, and of course, we know, at least in this fantasy world, that these figures are brought directly up out of their time wherever they are. So, to Tommy, the World War I medic, they were made last week. You know, these were fresh supplies to him from his time. Now Matron is from the modern time, thinking that this is really old stuff. "Amazing how they lasted, as if they were made last week." She indicated to Bright Stars that she would help her apply it to Little Bear's back. When they bandaged him between them, and after she had wiped her perspiring face on a scrap of cotton. "You can turn off the light now," she said. "Phew, I'm hot." Her towering cap was collapsing like an ice palace. Remember, she had that big decorative hat of authority. But she didn't seem to care. "Any more tea? What an experience. Wouldn't have missed it for the world. Always thought I could do simple ops as well as any of those fat cats. Oh dear, what am I saying?" And she chuckled again at her own disrespect to professional etiquette. After swigging down another bucket of tea and making sure Bright Stars had some too, she checked Little Bear's pulse, gave Bright Stars some simple instructions, and then said, "Gentlemen, I think, if you don't mind, I'd better be getting back to St. Thomas's. Goodness alone knows how they're coping without me. I'm afraid the unthinkable has happened and I've fallen asleep on duty. I will simply never live it down." She shook hands with Bright Stars, then gave her a pat. Not on the shoulder, oddly on the stomach. "Take care of your husband," she said, "and take care of yourself, too." Bright Stars looked shy. "You'll have a nice surprise for him if he doesn't come to very soon." Then she waved to the boys, straightened her wilted cap, and then hiking up her shirt over her black stockings, clambered back into the cupboard. When she'd gone, Omri watched Bright Stars settling down at Little Bear's side. He was still lying on the table, warmly wrapped up and sleeping soundly. "What did she mean about a surprise?" he asked. What did she mean about a surprise? He asked Patrick, who was yawning hugely. "Oh, come on, didn't you notice?" "Notice what?" "Her big belly. She's going to have a baby." "A baby? Wow, that will be great." "Are you nuts? That's all we need." "Indian women manage by themselves," said Omri, who'd read about it. "They don't make any fuss. Not like our mothers." "Sure." "I should think any mother would make a fuss if she had to have you," said Patrick. "Where do I kip?" Omri began. Where do I kip? I think kip is like sleep, another word for that. Omri was in like that country. They're in England. Omri was beginning to feel exhausted too, but it seemed heartless to go to sleep. "Do you think we should?" "She said he'd be okay. She told Bright Stars what to do. There's not much we can do anyway. Look, can I just put the cushions on the floor? I'm knackered." That's definitely a British expression. Great sounding one, too. In 3 minutes, he was flat out asleep. It took Omri a little longer. He crouched by the chest and stared at Little Bear and Bright Stars. She must be tired, too, especially considering... "Do you need anything, Bright Stars? Something to eat?" She raised her tired eyes to him and gave a little nod. "I'll get you something," he whispered. Down he went. He didn't turn the lights on this time. The reflection from the kitchen light could be seen in his parents' bedroom. He had no desire to explain to anyone what he was doing up at such an hour. The light from the street lamp was enough to show him cake, bread, butter. What was that? Something had gone past the window. He had seen it out of the corner of his eye. He froze. He could have sworn it was a man's head. When he could unfreeze, he went to the window and looked out. All he could see was Kitsa sitting on the sill, which would have settled the matter except for one thing. Her head was up. Her ears were pricked, not at Omri, but in the other direction. Omri climbed the stairs with the food, feeling more than a little uneasy. It seemed to him, on reflection, that the head he had seen, shown in the street lamp, was as if it had no hair. And that would mean maybe one of those skinhead kind of punk kids that he sees at the arcade at the end of the street. So, being spied on a little bit late at night. Creepy. But we'll stop there. It's the end of the chapter. We'll pick up on Chapter 9. Please like, comment, subscribe, of course, all that good YouTube stuff that keeps us creators going. Appreciate you sticking with me. We'll see you on the next one.